Well, it's hard to believe, but we are in lesson number 41 in this series of lessons. However, I hope that nobody thinks that because we're studying from the Sermon on the Mount that you see this as boring or uh, redundant or whatever. Because in the Sermon on the Mount, when we really think about the Sermon on the Mount, that it's the constitution of Christianity, that it covers a lot of topics. And you look back at through the topics that we have looked at, and even though we've spent some time on some of the topics, but yet a lot of the topics we spent just one lesson, and it's amazing the number of topics that we've covered within this series. Now, tonight's lesson will be the last one as far as Matthew chapter 6 is concerned. We'll pick up with Matthew chapter 7 next time. But in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 34, Jesus concluded this section of the Sermon on the Mount. Now, because of the conclusion, then it is appropriate for us to kind of spend a little bit of time to give an overview of the chapter. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time with it, but we should give an overview of the chapter. Remember that Matthew chapter 6 is about relationships, and it basically is divided into two parts. The first part is the disciples' spiritual relationship with the Father. And he used three illustrations to illustrate that spiritual relationship that we have with him. He used the idea of almsgiving, then he talked about prayer, and then he talked about the fasting. Then in the second chapter, or second half of the chapter, he talked about the spiritual relationship, or the disciples' physical and material relationship with this world. Now, in that particular section, he divided that into two parts, or we divided it into two parts. And the first part is verses 19 to 34, or actually that should be it is 34. But the first part is Matthew 6, 19 to 24, and that's the disciples' love of the world. And then the second part is disciples' anxiety over the things of this world. And obviously, that's the part that we're talking about here. The world has a powerful influence and a powerful grasp on humanity. For some people are governed by their possessions. And if you look through the scriptures, there are a number of different passages that exhort concerning our possessions. And we hoard them up, while others are governed by their possession because they're anxious or worried about the things of this world. And that fits those two different ideas there. Now, in this last section, Jesus stated his thesis 3 different times. In Matthew chapter 6 and verse 25, he said, "Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body what ye shall put on. Is not the life more than meat, and the body than raiment?" Then in verse number 31, he said, "Therefore take no thought, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or wherewithal shall we be clothed?" And then our final example is verse 34 of the thesis. And so notice how it is basically a repeat of that thesis. "Take therefore no thought for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof." Now, in this thesis, it's the basic thought of take no thought, or be not anxious, or do not worry. And it is interesting that that's translated in different ways in different translations. However, as far as the Greek is concerned, and looking at the Greek, take no thought is really the idea that the King James translates. But it's the overthought or overthinking of something. And that's what worry is. Worry is overthinking something. Now remember, a thesis is the key thought. And since it's repeated 3 different times, we ought to remember that it is the key thought. And since it is the thesis or the key thought, then everything in this section goes back to the thesis. We cannot ignore the thesis while we study this particular section. A person should not separate anything within this section from its key thought. Now, with this review in mind, then let us consider our text. Now, we've read it already once, but I want to read it once again. He said, "Take therefore no thought for the morrow, for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof." Now, this is the conclusion of this particular section of the Sermon on the Mount. And this particular section, with the restatement of the thesis, but also he adds a little bit more different information. But Jesus did, and I want to emphasize this point, that Jesus did more than just re-emphasize or restate the thesis. And even though it appears that that's what he did at first, I think when we go through this lesson, we'll see that there's more than just simply a restatement of the thesis. So now, the first point that we want to note is that Jesus' teaching concerns the future. So in that particular text, he said, "Take therefore no thought for the morrow." And so we have to remember that this is about the future, and the exhortation is about the future. So in the American Standard, it says, "Be not therefore anxious for tomorrow." Now, this is not merely a reputation of or a summary of what he taught within the section of the Sermon on the Mount. It's much more. Jesus took his thesis one step further. He stated his thesis, but now he takes it a step further by talking about tomorrow. Now, previous to this, he taught about the present concerns of this life. The present concerns would be the food and the clothing, and the food, drink, and clothing. Now, with this verse, Jesus instructed his disciple about the future concerns. Now, here is the way that worry works. If the present concerns do not cause us to worry, what do? We worry about the future concerns. So the future then steps up and takes the place of the present, and so then we start worrying about those future things. But is that not the way that worry works? I mean, we look at worry and we understand that that's exactly how it works. A person reasons within himself about worry and about the present concerns, and we say, "Oh yes, God feeds the birds. Oh yes, I remember that God cares for the flowers of the field. And therefore, I know that God cares about me." But then we understand that, but we ask ourselves about the future concerns. Yes, God takes care of us now, but will he take care of me tomorrow? Will he take care of us tomorrow? So worry always leaves the permanent impression it does not really want to be satisfied. I mean, that's the way worry works. But isn't that the way we really would expect it to work? Because if Satan can't get us with the present concerns, then will he not get us with the future concerns? Satan will take it a step further. Of course, every person wants to be relieved of worry. And we all want to be relieved of anxiety. We've all had it. We want to be relieved of it. However, worry can be have such a grasp upon us that we always find something else to worry about. Well, worry has an active imagination. In our second point, we want to notice that tomorrow's thoughts. Now, in this, we're talking about the statement that Jesus made, "For the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself." So we take it a step further. Now, the point that Jesus made is this: why are you worried about tomorrow? Because tomorrow you'll have enough anxiety on its own. Now, Jesus exposed the pure folly and the foolishness of worrying about tomorrow. Worry is about the utter or worry about the future is about the utter futility and uselessness of worry. It is a pure waste of energy. And I think we all recognize that. In fact, I can't believe that any of us would not recognize that. I mean, let's ask some questions here. How many of us has built bridges that we have never crossed by worry? I know that I have. I've built a lot of them. And it amazes me, and I'll be thinking to myself, now why am I building this bridge? And yet I still build bridges that I never build or never cross. We think about things and we decide words that we never say. I mean, have you ever had anybody to say something to you and you start worrying about what they said and you think, well, this is the way I'm going to respond. This is the words I'm going to use. But we never use those words. We all do that. And we all think about those kind of things. So we think about the future. And we imagine things we think others will do or say to us that they never do. Well, every one of us go through those different things, and we could probably come up with some other examples of that. But I think you see what the point I'm making here. When we start building bridges, when we start deciding words, when we start thinking that others are going to do something that they will never do, is it not an act of futility? Obviously it is. And so we have to be careful about such things. It appears Jesus may be saying, if you are intent about worrying, then worry about today, because tomorrow you'll have enough things to worry about on its own. So, if we're intent on worrying, let's limit it to today. So here are some real questions that we need to ask. How are we going to face our daily tribulations and troubles and trials? Though it seems like when trouble comes, it all comes at once, doesn't it? I mean, when things happen, I'm old enough to know that when things happen, doesn't come in threes? Well, normally that's the way it happens. And so it comes all at one time. And when it starts going awry, we then start worrying about what else is going to go wrong, what else can happen. And sure enough, other things do happen. And though it does come all at once, but the fact is, everything that happens to us does not come and does not happen in one day. Each day has enough trials and troubles and tribulations for that day's concern. When we worry about today and tomorrow, we are overloading ourselves with too many problems. In fact, I was reading an article today, this week, I should say, this past week, and I found it interesting. I really thought about using that particular article, or at least a portion of it, for this lesson. It was written by Brother Tom Waycaster, and I've used several of his articles, and I think some of them that have really stood out. But I don't want to use the same writer in every bulletin, other than myself and every other bulletin. But nonetheless, Tom made a very interesting point, and he actually quoted from another article, but there were a couple things in that article I didn't agree with, and so I chose not to use that particular thing. But it was making that same point. When we worry about today and we worry about tomorrow, we overload ourselves. If we're going to be worried, then we must keep it limited to today. We must not allow the future and all the troubles that might come in the future to burden us down. So we need to take one day at a time. That's really what that's about. One day at a time. And I know that there's a denominational song that we sometimes will hear, one day at a time. And we must always remember that it is one day at a time, which Jesus gives and allows us to go through, but he limits it to one day at a time. And that worrying about one day is totally sufficient. In our last point, we want to note that today's sufficient troubles, and is really based upon the last statement of the chapter and of the verse. He said, sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Now, all men have a daily quota of problems and difficulties in life. And I know, the old saying is the squeaky wheel, the sticky wheel gets the grease, or the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And we've all heard that expression. But you know what I found through the years is that just because a wheel is squeaking, that doesn't mean the other ones don't need grease too. Isn't that true? I mean, just because you hear this person going through all their troubles and that they have to express all their troubles that they go through, that doesn't mean nobody else is going through troubles. In fact, that just means that sometimes it means, not always, but sometimes it means that they just need to have someone to listen to, or to listen to them. Well, the fact is, all men go through a daily quota of problems and difficulties in life. And all men, some problems are constant from day to day, and we have those problems that we go through today, and tomorrow we'll go through those same problems, and it's consistent from day to day. Other problems are reoccurring from time to time. Oh, they might occur now, but then several months from now, they'll pop up its ugly head and come across again. And still other problems vary from season to season. I don't know about you, but when fall comes, I have these troubles with my throat and with my sinuses and those kind of things. And so we have those seasonal problems that come upon us. Now, every day must be lived in and of itself. That's what I think that Jesus taught here. They come as a unit. And so we then take care of today's problems, and we then care about today's problem. Each day is a dish of today's problems is served upon that platter. But it's today's problem that we have to deal with. However, we must not go beyond today and tackle tomorrow's quota of problems today. And in fact, we're not going to accomplish tomorrow's problems today. It's not going to happen. We can worry about it all we want to, but it just simply will not solve the problems for tomorrow. Because when they do come upon us tomorrow, they won't be what we thought they would be. They won't be as we have imagined in our worrying minds. Now, this is the common sense philosophy of life. The Lord taught, if you want to go through life without crippling yourself, then do not bring tomorrow's care or yesterday's burden upon yourself today. Care about today and the burdens that are associated with it today. Burden yourself with too many anxieties can cause a person to perhaps lose his health and lose control of his nerves. And we know all kinds of people like that. They get so caught up and so worried about this and that and the other. And brethren, I'm talking about those of us that are older. We sit at home because we're not able to get out as much as we used to. And we get to thinking about ourselves, and we start thinking, man, or my neck hurts. Oh, wait a second. My back hurts. Oh, wait a second. My elbow hurts. My little finger hurts. My lower back hurts. My legs hurt. My knees hurt. And it goes on and on. And then we start thinking about, oh, I heard that noise. What's that noise? And it's nothing more than the furnace kicking on when we actually listen to it. But you see, we get so caught up with those kind of things, and we've got to we have to do something to relieve those anxieties that we have. Now, I'm going to give you a list here in a little bit of some ways that we can do in order to relieve those anxieties. A person must live today, not yesterday, and not tomorrow. So why then today? Why did Jesus teach about worrying in such a way? Well, worry about tomorrow can cripple us today. Instead of accomplishing the daily quota of problems, our effectiveness is reduced. I mean, if we're trying to tackle too many problems all at one time, we're not being very effective. And we've all known people that try to do that. Instead of just trying to take care of one problem and take care of that problem and then moving on to the next one and the next one as they come today and then tomorrow when tomorrow comes, because it's sufficient unto itself, we try to tackle all these problems at one time and we can't accomplish anything. Because of such, we're not able to tackle today's problems because we're trying to, and we're overloaded with tomorrow's problems. So it is, in effect, we are trying to tackle yesterday's problems, today's problems, and tomorrow's problems and trials and tribulations. You're talking about an overload of problems. We just get bogged down. Well, another reason why we ought not worry is because worry wastes time that could be otherwise used more effectively. Now, think about the amount of time that we waste worrying. How much more productive could we be in our time if we used it for something else? Well, let me give you a few things. And really, some of these things are things that I've thought about to help me in my problems with worrying. Well, you know, sometimes I start thinking about this worry or that anxiety, and I stop and have to ask myself, why am I having so much anxiety over this? Instead of thinking about that, why not meditate about God and how powerful and how good our God is? And it is amazing to me how anxieties can be eliminated because I've just simply shut off my mind to it and focused my mind on something that's good. I think that's so important. Meditate about God. Or another thing that has helped me is meditate about some great Bible principle. You know, there's all kinds of Bible principles. And some of those we like to think about, and some of those we don't like to think about. But the other night, and I thought this was kind of interesting, the other night for our youth devotional, I asked a bunch of questions about your favorite. Now, I had all kinds of favorites, and I mean, like your favorite passage, your favorite thought, your favorite, I don't remember all the different things I had off the top of my head at least, but I listed all those different things out and asked people, and they gave an immediate response to it. But you know, if we start thinking about those things, that gets us out of that anxiety mode. So meditate about some great Bible principle and even some negative principles, because one of the things I asked was, who is the biggest jerk in the Bible, or your favorite jerk? And I found that kind of interesting, and different people came up with different things, but the person I asked, you know who she said? Judas. Well, wasn't Judas a jerk? I'd call him a jerk. I mean, he didn't do what he was supposed to be doing. But then also, why not, if we're going to spend time thinking, why not think about Jesus and the salvation that he offers? I mean, is it just simply a thought that we can get through in just 5 minutes or 10 minutes? I don't know about you. I could spend a lot of time in thinking about all the different things. Think about, along with that, all the different words that are used with reference to our salvation, like redemption or justification, and the list could go on. Another thought that I had is preparing for just the right words of a particular statement to help someone to open up their eyes. You know, I hope that every single one of us have somebody that we talk to about their salvation. Now, I don't know about you, but there are different ones that I talk to at different times, and I have to think to myself, what words can I use to help them to see the point that I'm making? I want their salvation. I want to help them to open up their eyes. Now, I think that's a biblical principle. In fact, if you read the book of Ecclesiastes in the 12th chapter, I mean, it takes time to think about the exact words and how to say them properly. And in fact, as a preacher, I know that that's the case. I sometimes will think about, how am I going to convey this thought in such a way that everybody will understand? Now, I know that not everybody understands, and you know, I used to tell the preacher students, if you think that everybody's listening all the time to your lesson, you're crazy. I mean, you know, that's not the truth. We wander in and out with our minds, do we not? Of course we do, and all preachers ought to know that. But then there are occasions in which the preacher wants to get everybody's attention, and he spends the time to say something in a specific way so that everybody will listen. Well, we ought to do that as we think about others that we talk to. And if that's not enough, then why not spend a little time memorizing Scripture? I don't know of any better way that we could do it. Now, what I've suggested over the years is to take a 3x5 card or something similar to that, and that's what I do. I have a set of cards that I have, and several of them, and I'll write down a memory verse on it. I usually do it on the computer, but you can do it by hand and put it on that 3x5 card, and I stick it in my front pocket when I'm memorizing it, and every little bit I'll take it out of my front pocket and read it and put it back in there. And you know, by the end of the week, I usually have it memorized. Now, Sister Freda down in Hernandez, Sister Freda Hernandez down in Querétaro, Mexico, I mentioned that in a lesson down there. I was doing a seminar down there, what they call a seminar, what we would call a gospel meeting. And I mentioned that very thing. And so the next time I saw Sister Freda, it was in another place, in another town, and she wanted me to be sure to know that she kept a 3x5 card, and she then memorized different passages that very way. And it works. I mean, I know it works. If you just do that multiple times during the day, you're going to have it. But just think about this too. When you pull that card out, what are you thinking about? Worry? Or are you thinking about the Scriptures? Pretty obvious, isn't it? Yeah, we can do a lot less worrying if we just do a little bit more memorization. Now, I know, and I've heard all the different things that people say. I know it's more difficult when you're older. There is no doubt in my mind it's more difficult. I mean, after all, I'm getting older. I know it's more difficult than it was when I was younger, but it's not impossible. If we can memorize the scores of the NFL, we can memorize some Scripture. And we might have to start out with a couple of two-verse or two-word scriptures, like John 11:35, Jesus wept, or maybe 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 26, rejoice evermore, or the next verse, pray without ceasing. Well, you know, we might have to start out with those small scriptures, but you know, when we start memorizing those passages, and then we start memorizing the references, You know, it's going to surprise us in time how much we have memorized. So those are some suggestions that will take worry away. Now, worry takes away from our daily trust in God. One of the greatest problems humanity is a lack of trust in God in general and also in particular. We trust God will take care of us throughout our whole life, and then we have difficulty thinking God will help us through a specific daily trial or a specific daily tribulation. You see, we get the general down, I suppose, in some sense, but then we have difficulty with the specific. We must learn to cast all of our cares upon God as they arise from day to day, rather than letting them accumulate yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Success in life is often dependent upon whether or not we worry. You take two men who've gone through basically the same trial. What happens? One man fails and the other is successful. The successful man understands he made a mistake. The successful man understands he failed. He understands he sinned, but he leaves the past behind and reaches for the future. Now, that's exactly what Paul did. If you really think about the Apostle Paul, is that not what he did? I mean, he persecuted Christians. He failed in his past, but he was successful in his future. And so to the Philippians, he said in Philippians 3, verses 13 and 14, "Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, and reaching forth unto those things which are before. I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus." The other man dwells upon his past. He spends his night worrying about the things that had happened. His energy is sapped away, and he is not able to accomplish any good, successful work because of it. Is it wrong to think and to plan about the future? Well, of course not. Jesus did not teach a person is not to think about the future, but that a person must not be anxious or worried about the future. There is a difference. The farmer, in order for him to reap a harvest, he must plant today. And the laborers must continue to labor to have the paycheck at the end of their labors. Nonetheless, they must not be so concerned with the future that they have no time to live in the present. I mean, that's what the proverb writer did. He talked about the person that there's a lion in the street, and he never accomplishes anything because he's worried about the lion in the street. Well, sometimes we just need to battle the lion and move on. We must learn the vitally important lesson. We must walk with God day by day. Yes, it is necessary for us to walk with God day by day. We must rely upon Him day by day. And we must learn to trust Him day by day. Ultimately, worry then is a failure to grasp and apply faith. In a marvelous way, in a marvelous fashion, Jesus brought this section of the Sermon on the Mount to a conclusion. He dealt with our daily needs and concluded with the future. In Matthew 6 and verse 34, Jesus said, "Take therefore no thought for the morrow, for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof." Now, most of you know that I've been diagnosed with a rare blood disease. and it's still there. I still have to deal with it. But you know, that last statement has helped me probably more than anything else. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. I have to limit my thoughts for today. I have to limit my concerns today. I have to limit my concerns for my health problem today. I can't be caught up with tomorrow. So what does the future hold? Well, who knows? I mean, what does the future hold? I think about different things I hear others say, and myself, I've said it. Will we maintain good health? I mean, what does the future hold? Who knows? But I do know this. One of the first funerals, not the first, but one of the first funerals I preached was a man who was taking care of his wife. His wife had a tumor the size of a football, and she was a very, very small lady. I mean, she wasn't very big at all, but she had a tumor the size of a football, and they went in there and cut it out. And everybody didn't think, I mean, even the medical professionals, they didn't think she would make it, but she did. And her husband, who appeared to be in perfect health, was walking down the street, had gone to meet his buddies for some coffee, taking a little bit of break from caring for his wife, and he fell down on the sidewalk, had a heart attack, and died. And I preached his funeral first, and then I later on preached her funeral. Now, it wasn't very long before she passed, but nonetheless, you see, it doesn't make any difference. Will we maintain good health? I don't know, and neither do you. And then that usually will come up with something like, who will pass next? I don't know who will, but I do know this, that sometimes I look back on life and I think about, in fact, at this moment, I'm thinking about a specific lady that we know, and everybody thought that she would have passed 15 years ago, but she still holds on. And others that we thought would last longer have passed. Well, what will happen to this congregation? I know that's a present concern for this congregation. We don't know what's going to happen to it. I don't know. You don't know. But you know what we have to do? We have to be concerned about tomorrow. Are we doing the Lord's will? Are we taking the gospel into the world? Are we trying to build numbers, or are we trying to save souls? There's a difference between those two thoughts. I don't know what's going to happen to this congregation, and nobody else does. Nobody knows. But I do know this. We need to be strong today. And if we'll be strong today in the work of the Lord, we will be in existence tomorrow. And the questions could go on and on. Who, what, when, where, why, how, and on the questions could go. And we could add, who knows the number of questions that we could add to that. There is no way humanly possible for us to answer those questions. And for this reason, there is no reasonable reason to worry about them and to worry about such matters. We can't answer them, so why worry about them? Let God be found true and every man a liar. Let us plant and let us water, and then God will provide the increase. This evening, we do want to offer the invitation. There may be someone that would like to respond to it. If there is someone who would like to respond, then please do so, as together we stand and sing to encourage you.
What can wash away my sin? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. What can make me whole again? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. Oh, precious is the flow that makes me white as snow. No other fount I know, nothing but the blood of Jesus. For For my pardon this I see, nothing but the blood of Jesus. For my pardon this I see, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Oh, precious is the flow that makes me white as snow. No other fount I know, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Nothing can for sin atone, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Not a good that I have done, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Oh, precious is the flow that makes me white as snow. No other fount I know, nothing but the blood of Jesus.
Chris is going to lead us in prayer, but just go ahead and stay, and I'll give some instruction concerning these labels. And if everybody will help, we'll have this taken care of in 10 minutes, maybe 15. Let's bow together.